because I said what was on my mind. I made a lot of enemies. I made a lot of enemies.
Welcome, everyone, to Science From the Fringe. My name is Bryce Nickels. I'm a professor of genetics at Rutgers University. And today I'm joined by Anthony Bellotti, who's the founder and president of the White Coat Waste Project, which is a government watchdog organization that advocates for ending taxpayer-funded animal experimentation. Anthony was recently described by Cheryl Gay Stolberg, a writer for the New York Times, as an effusive man with a thick head of dark hair and passing resemblance for the 1950s crooner Jerry Vale. And I bring this up, Anthony, because in addition to being president of White Coat Waste, you're my neighbor. And recently we had a very nice time. We met and we had dinner on the Jersey Shore, whatever. And I can definitely say that you are a effusive man with a thick head of dark hair, although I don't know in terms of the resemblance to the 1950s crooner Jerry Vale. I'll have to let the viewers of this episode decide for themselves. So welcome today to my podcast. I'm very excited to talk to you. How are you doing today?
Hey, Bryce, great to be here. And I don't know about Jerry Vale. I've heard worse, so I'll take it. But I'm doing well. It's great to see you again.
Well, you have a housemate there. You want to say who that is?
This is Delilah. This is my best bud here. She's my best friend. And Cheryl Stolberg also wrote about her. She's formerly known as government ID number 87. You can see that her tattoos. She's got the tats in her ears. She's a survivor of an animal testing lab, the largest one in the U.S. government, which was at the USDA. And a White Coat Waste campaign several years ago exposed and closed that lab. And I adopted her and one of the other breeding moms who came out of that program. And that other, unfortunately, petite passed away a few years ago. Delilah is still here. And here we are.
For a long time, I've been wanting to have a conversation on a podcast, a public conversation with either you or Justin Goodman about what's been going on recently. Let's start, though, by discussing the history of White Coat Waste. So this year marks the 15th anniversary of White Coat Waste. Can you explain briefly why you founded White Coat Waste and how the organization has evolved since you founded it back in 2011?
Yeah, thanks, Bryce. This is our 15th anniversary. We're very proud of that. I founded the organization myself in 2011. But the story really begins in 1995. We got to go back 31 years this summer. It starts earlier than 2011. In 1995, I was 17 years old, so I'm dating myself here. I'm now 48, but I was 17 in 95, and I was in between my junior and senior year of high school working in an animal experimentation laboratory in New York City. And I wanted a letter of recommendation for college. I wanted a pre-medical track for getting into, an accelerated program for becoming a doctor. That's what I thought I was going to do in my life. My dad was a dentist in New Jersey. He was in the clinical practice medical field. And I wanted to follow in, broadly speaking, in his footsteps. And I thought getting an internship in a lab would be a leg up on my competition for that track of college applications. And on my first day working in the lab, we were working with pigs. There were a lot of other animals there that I saw, but I remember saying to myself, if this is one of the good labs, the hell are they doing in the bad ones? I didn't know anything about animal testing. I was not a PETA member. I was not a vegetarian. I was nothing. I was a kid, 17-year-old kid doing 17-year-old things, mostly playing drums. And again, like I said, trying to get into college to go, towards the career I thought at the time. I was there for about seven-ish weeks, give or take, about 7 weeks, right around now. I remember the Devils were winning their first Stanley Cup right around that time. So it was June of 95, 31 years ago, this June. And I did it, and I said, I got to do something about this. My first, your first, the first impression you get is don't say anything. Keep it to yourself. Don't make waves. And I didn't. I didn't say anything. I just, zip my lip button, but I wanted to do something about it. I never, and after that, I immediately pivoted to saying, I got to do something about this. I want to find a way to fight back against this. I want to make a difference. And, I didn't know how to do it then, but I do now. And I pursued a strange career to get here, right? White Coat Waste did not happen overnight. It didn't, there was a lot of stuff between 1995 and 2011, a number of years, right? You'd think after working in a laboratory with abused animals that I'd go pursue a career in the animal rights movement. You'd be wrong. I never worked a day in my life on the staff of one of these big animal rights groups, and not at all. My first, I went to college and I withdrew from the pre-medical stuff pretty early. Before freshman orientation I did. My dad pulled me aside and talked to me and said, son, this is a square peg in a round hole for you. You're not that good at science. You're kind of struggling. You kind of struggled through high school with, you kind of held your own in biology, but you were kind of crappy in chemistry and physics and math. You're not gonna do well in the filtration system. You're meant for other things. You have other gifts. I don't think this science to medicine thing is for you. Now, I didn't want to hear that at the time, but he was right. It was one of the best, it probably was the best advice I ever got in my life. Don't put a square peg in a round hole. Follow your strengths. And I did. But it still took a little bit of meandering. I pulled out of that and then I started following the crowd in college. I briefly pursued finance and investment banking. I thought when I graduated in 2000 that I'd make a lot of money. This was like the dot-com boom. The stock market was going crazy. I was going to go into investment banking and I'll make a lot of money and fund advocacy campaigns to fight back against what I saw in the laboratory, right? So I worked in Deutsche Bank for about a year after graduating college. I was there for 9/11, and I was also laid off about 6 months after that. Economy was doing poorly in a recession. I was also not very good at it. Another square peg in a round hole. I wasn't making a lot of money. I wasn't making any money, barely any money. And again, square peg in a round hole. So this time I pivoted, and this time I got it right. Third time's the charm. I said, screw this. I'm going to Washington, D.C., and I'm not going to learn how to fund campaigns to fight back. I'm going to learn how to run them. So I became a professional political consultant. So this was kind of like my Legally Blonde moment, right? Yeah, the Reese Witherspoon movie where she goes to Washington to fight back against cosmetic testing on animals. Well, I went to DC also for that. I wanted to learn a skill set that I thought would be useful and that I'd be good at, and I did. So I became a professional political consultant. I went to graduate school of political management to get, if you will, an MBA in politics, polling, advertising, opposition research, lobbying, all the tricks of the trade. I worked for Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger as an opposition researcher. I was the executive director of the American Association of Political Consultants as well. And then I worked at the RNC briefly. And then after that, I worked in an agency for a better part of 7-8 years, doing a lot of federal public affairs campaigns, including, and again, these are my clients' work, not my own, but I was advising on efforts to stop Obamacare, various pro-life campaigns fighting against taxpayer funding of abortion. And that's when it hit. That's when it hit me. Defund Planned Parenthood campaigns I was consulting on, and I was inspired. I was sitting on the beach in 2010 in the Turks and Caicos of all places. And I was reading a book. I was reading several books about animals in labs, and it hit me, and I said, "Holy shit! Now I've got it. This stuff is virtually all taxpayer funded for animal testing. Most of it is. This is what I do for a living, is cut taxpayer funding, or at least, the campaigns I'm working on, fighting against defund Planned Parenthood, fighting to stop Obamacare." And I said, what if we could take these same tactics and apply them for animals in laboratories? Holy moly, we may have something here. So that was the first epiphany. And that was probably like 2010 when it hit me. One day after the 2010 midterm elections, I was working on Lisa Murkowski's campaign at the time. One day after, and I sit down and I write out the skeleton for a brand new revolutionary approach to anti-vivisection or saving animals in labs. And that skeleton became the White Coat Waste Project. I founded it in 2011, the next year. So this is our 15th anniversary next month, actually. It was July. And 2013, we got our nonprofit status, became a 501c3 nonprofit. And it went, our first full year was 2016. I was, like I said, I was still phasing out of my day job, working for Republican candidates' causes by day. And then in 2016, it becomes a full-time effort. I founded it myself out of pocket. There was no organization. There was no money. There wasn't a bank account to put the money in. I had the idea for how to shake up the entire issue, and that's how it happened. I went into political consulting as a means to an end. I went into it to learn a skill set. And like I said, when I was 17 years old, I didn't pay taxes. I didn't know anything about taxes. I didn't know anything about animal testing. I just wanted to do something about it. And, connecting the dots in my life, I can connect the dots looking backwards. I couldn't looking forwards. The old Steve Jobs saying, right? You can't, you can only connect the dots in your life looking backwards, not forwards. I knew what I wanted to do. I had no idea how to do it, but it took all those years of osmosis and learning. And lo and behold, it worked.
What is White Coat Waste's mission?
So we're a taxpayer watchdog organization. Our mission is to expose and end the U.S. government's $20 billion taxpayer-funded animal testing business. We work exclusively on taxpayer-funded animal testing. We're the only organization in the United States that focuses exclusively on taxpayer funding of animal testing. So, we're the organization that exposed Fauci's Beagle testing. We're the organization that first exposed taxpayer funding for the Wuhan laboratory. We're the organization that exposed transgender mice. You met Delilah. We're the organization that ran the campaign that exposed and ended the largest cat laboratory in the United States federal government. And we're the organization that brought conservatives to the cause.
Can you clarify, when you refer to, you're talking about animal testing, what specifically are you seeking to end with respect to animal testing or animal research at the NIH? Because your primary advocacy focuses on eliminating dogs, cats, primates. Is that that's a lot of the stuff that you get the most publicity for, but the majority of the animal research in the NIH is done using other animals, mice, rats, fish, other vertebrae. I can list them off. So do you object to all of it, or are there certain categories that you say are okay? Or
look, our mission is we oppose taxpayer-funded animal testing. I personally oppose all of it, but our organization is a specialist. We only work on taxpayer funding of animal experimentation because in the United States, the U.S. government is the largest funder, more than 2 to 1 over the entire private sector combined.
Right. So it's fish as well, like mice, fish, rats, all that stuff. Okay. Just to be clear.
Yeah. And we work on that stuff too. Wuhan, humanized mice, transgender mice. Those aren't dogs and cats. But we work on all these issues. We have priorities. Look, if we were the ACLU, they have priorities. They work on I don't civil rights, death penalty, free speech. They pick issue priorities, right? We have our priorities too. Getting the U.S. government out of the dog testing business was one of our first priorities. Getting it out of the cat testing business, but we have a larger stated goal too, Bryce, which was we wanted to bring conservatives into the cause. When I started the organization in 2011, this was a left-only issue. It was the exclusive domain of the left. And effectiveness and impact comes from the center. But to do that, to get the football to the 50-yard line, I had to move it from the left all the way to the right. I had to, in order, you know what I mean? I had to recalibrate it because the football was all the way to the left. That's a problem. There was a 20-point gap between Republicans and Democrats. Republicans lagged Democrats by 20 points on this issue. They were worse. This was a mess. This is why the issue was kind of at a stalemate in this country until white coat waste came along. It was going nowhere. I shouldn't say that. It was the number of animals in labs were going up, and the amount of money being spent on animal testing was at an all-time high. So it was a left-only issue, and it was a losing one. I wanted to end the culture of losing in the animal rights movement. I wanted to make a difference for animals. That was my life's work. That's what I saw when I was 17 years old. And unfortunately, the animal rights movement was stuck in a culture of losing. They embraced losing culture and wore it like a badge of honor. Until white coat waste, something like no cat lab had been shut down in no federal cat labs had been shut down in 40 years. No federal government dog labs had been shut down for nearly 20 years. And again, when PETA was founded in 1980, animal testing was probably less than $2 billion a year problem. They could have killed this thing in the crib. Now it's well over $20 billion a year problem. So we had this major problem that no effectiveness for animals was getting done. So what I wanted to do was find a way to fix that problem. So bringing both sides to the table meant getting conservatives involved, left plus right, so we could finally get some impact. I founded White Coat Waste in 2011, but Bryce, nobody even knew at the time. Nobody even realized in the animal, that this was mostly a taxpayer-funded issue. You were hearing about things like cruelty-free cosmetics. You would think in 2011 that Revlon putting makeup in bunnies' eyes was the face of modern experimentation on animals, and it just simply wasn't. So we had to reboot all of this. We had to shake it up. You weren't hearing the story that it was the U.S. government funding this stuff circa 2011. Not really. And I figured, well, if there are groups who are working only on cruelty-free cosmetics, that's a noble issue. Okay, great. I oppose makeup testing on bunnies, but that's a drop in the bucket if it's even happening at all. So why not form an organization that only focuses on the biggest problem for animals in labs, the number one spender? Let's invent that. It also happened to align with my expertise. I knew a thing or two about how to dismantle and defund government programs. And furthermore, at the same time, let's get new blood into the fight. They say good campaigns win, but great ones bring new blood and new people to the fight. That was the unstated goal. The stated goal of what we were to do was to expose and end animal labs. But the unstated goal was new strategy, new tactics, and new blood. To actually make a difference for the cause, we had to widen the tent and get people outside of a little vegan bubble in DC. We had to get more people involved. We had to get the left and the right involved. That's how winning is done. And I didn't think we were winning anything circa 2011. That's why I started this from nothing.
Is it fair to describe White Coat Waste as both a taxpayer watchdog organization and an animal welfare organization?
Absolutely. We are a government watchdog or a taxpayer watchdog. that works on animal testing and specifically works on taxpayer-funded animal testing. Bryce, look, I could have founded an animal rights group. I could have done that. I could have founded anything I wanted. It was a clean sheet design in 2011. But here's the thing. If I had founded yet another animal rights group, it's been done in this country and it fit. The animal rights movement fought a war on animal testing and lost. Think about this. This issue of experimenting on animals as a public controversy and a public debate goes back to the Reconstruction. I mean, like the Civil War. Like after the Civil War in the Victorian era, the issue of animals in labs became a really contentious debate in this country. Goes back a long, long time. And the issue was going nowhere. The animal rights movement is a lot to blame for that. It's because, again, they were coming at it doing the same old tactics, throwing red paint, telling you can't eat meat, turning off half the country. It was a frozen, polarized debate in this country circa 2011. Yes, it works. No, it doesn't. We need it to save lives. Rats have rights. Back and forth. It was like taste great, less filling, taste great, less filling, like the old Bud Light commercials, right? Pro-life, pro-choice, pro-life, women's right to choose, it's killing a baby. Anytime you have these issues in the public square that are frozen, polarized, split down the middle and going nowhere, it favors the status quo. And the status quo were labs killing animals. Okay. Time was passing and this issue was going nowhere, but getting worse, right? The number of animals in labs was going up. And this issue was polarized because, you had groups like PETA turning off half the country or more, okay? It was split. The issue was deadlocked. The country was divided and it was going nowhere, okay? I figured the way I was taught was in order to persuade people, if you want to actually make somebody change their mind and go from the switch variable in polling, you move from X to Y. In a political campaign, I'm going to switch. It would be the analog of I'm going to switch my vote from Kamala to Trump. What's the switch variable? What will it take to move somebody from position A to B? The only way that works, there's two things we know in the polling business, right? New information has the power to persuade people. Got to be new. Or old information repackaged in a new way. Think about that. Learning is about being surprised. You got to surprise people. That wasn't happening. It was the same old saying, labs are bad to animals, it's killing animals, rats have rights. We were hearing this tired argument going nowhere in this country for a long time. No progress was being made. And it was split down party lines. And I said, we have to find a new way to talk about this old issue. So invented a brand new approach to it in which we're going to make it a referendum on wasteful government spending, right? The focus is animals in labs. That's all we work on. We don't work on government spending for anything else. Never have and never will. We're fanatically single issue and stick to our mission no matter what. But we only focused on the source of the problem. Whereas legacy groups in the animal rights establishment like PETA, they were chasing the symptom, not the disease. They were going around the country chasing random college professors doing tests on animals in their labs, chasing them around, doing protests, screaming and screeching at people and shutting almost nothing down. Okay, chasing these individual college professors around. Remember, when they started in 1980, this problem was, give or take, $2 billion a year, maybe even less. Okay, now that went up. Okay, that's a horrible track record. It's disqualifying. They were chasing the symptom, not the disease. The symptom was cruelty in colleges. The disease was government spending. That's why we needed a supply side approach. And in order to do that, we needed to change the referendum onto who pays. Who's paying for this? That's what white coat waste did. We converted the war from a war on animal testing, which was lost, to a war on government waste. That was the inflection point on how this issue moved. We had to bypass a frozen, tastes great, less filling debate in this country. That was intentional. That's what I did in 2011.
I think I am like many in the middle on this issue. I think there is a need for some taxpayer-funded animal research. The way we're set up right now, we rely upon use of animals to test new drugs. If you eliminate animal testing of drugs without suitable alternatives, we're left to test new drugs on humans. This is, I guess, where the sort of legitimate critique of, or not even critique, it's just the debate, right? So, like, I think
Yeah.
many of the things that you guys point out should be eliminated. They're cruel, it's torturous. But at the same time, there are circumstances under which I think it's appropriate to use animals as models. But I also think it is something that taxpayer funding is justified for. How do you respond to that critique? Or
Yeah.
that's the place I think where the good faith argument
Yeah, I
really
mean,
is to be had here.
It's interesting, Bryce. I mean, let me just, before I answer the, a couple things. I want to rewind in time back to 2009, 2010, in the proto years when I was doing the homework on this issue. I studied, so look, again, what the hell did I know about anti-vivisection or animal testing, right? Like I said, I never worked a day in my life on the staff of an animal rights group. No, not at all. But the closest I had come was, again, I worked in an animal lab when I was 17 years old. But again, I come from the political business. That was my background. I spent a full year between 2009 and 10 doing nothing but sucking up every public opinion poll and focus group I could get my hands on, going back to the war, World War II. I went all the way back to the invention of, well, slightly after the war. The invention of polling was like 48, 49 in this country as a scientific discipline. So I went back, like I said, and looked at every public opinion poll I could get about what does the public believe about animal testing, because I felt that we had to get outside of the Beltway. Look at what you're saying here. It's like, well, I'm somewhere in the middle here. I can't stomach the cruelty, unconscionable things they do to cats and dogs in labs, but I also feel that,
Well, and mice too. There's a lot of unnecessary mice experiments. Like, there's a lot of wasted animal research.
But it's somewhere in the middle, right? Common sense.
Right.
You're not against all of it, but you're definitely not for anything goes. You're probably a common sense kind of guy in the middle. Like, I figured at the time, I want to test this out. I want to see, where does the public think? Because I had a feeling most people were probably in the middle. They're certainly not eat, sleeping, and shitting this issue 24/7. Let's get outside of the Beltway here and figure out, what do the American people feel like you do? So I studied, like I said, I sucked up every poll I could get my hands on, going back to the late 40s. And I got real well acquainted with this issue. On the one hand, public opinion for animal testing, support for experimentation was super high in the late 40s. It was like 80 to 90%. And it just fell precipitously to under 50% very recently. So that's good. Public opinion, on the one hand, for me, public opinion overall, just medical testing on animals, public opinion moved decisively against experimentation. But the number of animals kept going up, 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 up.
But Anthony, in those polls, do they separate the animal? Like, is it dogs?
Some of them do. They're all over the place. They ask the questions differently.
Right. I guess I would say if it polled, people would support rat and mice and maybe fish, maybe bird, but they would vehemently oppose dogs, cats, and like the primates. That's my thought. I don't know if that's been polled at that level.
It has been polled at that level. And you're not far off. The truth is, people were divided on these questions. It's all on how you ask the question, right? But you asked me, like, what would I, again, what do you say to somebody who says, well, we need this stuff? Look, I'm going to be honest about it. Animal testing works, except when it doesn't work. That's the problem with it, right? Look, white coat waste is about follow the money. There's a reason for that. We don't get too much into the science, right? Follow the science. We're not scientists. We don't really do that. That's not our thing. But I'm acquainted with it. sufficiently to be able to tell you, I mean, look, I think the stuff works except when it doesn't. But that's like saying if you throw spaghetti at the wall, some of it will stick. You just can't really know when which spaghetti strands are going to work. It's not a very predictive science. It's not how it works. I mean, it's like, if it works in a rat, maybe there's a 50-50 chance it'll work in a mouse. I mean, look, it's not great with as a scientific endeavor. It just isn't. But I wanted to come up with an approach that was just totally different, right? We don't work on private sector testing. We don't work on cosmetics testing. We don't work on pharmaceutical, except for government, unless it's government mandated. We don't work on it. It's not because we like it. I oppose all of it personally, but the organization took a very different approach because here's why. The reason I did that was because I knew that when looking at those polls, public opinion was all over the place. And I looked at like what the pro-life movement had done, because again, my clients a lot. What I was inspired by was the defund Planned Parenthood campaigns I was working on, and I knew that there were a lot. If you just look at like the pro-life versus pro-choice issue, there were a lot of people in the middle, Bryce, in the middle, who were, well, they would describe themselves as, I'm a moderate, it's a woman's right to choose, the Supreme Court settled this, but whoa, I'm not paying for someone else's here. Don't make me pay for, whoa, I'm not paying for hers. I draw the line at that. So rather than look at just, when is it looking at the science or going grant by grant and when is it useful, when is it not, we bypassed that and said, let's try something different. Let's just make this a referendum on who pays and who doesn't pay for it. And if we do that, we can unify the country, right? And furthermore, not just get a lot of conservatives involved, which was critical, absolutely decisive for making progress. We would do that and at the same time find the quickest, fastest, most effective means for getting labs shut down and getting animals out. It could do both things in one blow by doing that. I knew I could poach. Conservative audiences who at the time were reflexively supporting animal testing, right? I told you that in 2020, the late 2000s and early 2010s, Republicans were 20 points worse on animals testing, right? When you ask them about medical, just broad medical testing. That's the question. Support or oppose medical testing on animals, not cats, not dogs, not beagles, not Fauci, medical testing on animals. They were lagging by 20 points. Now these are people who were skeptical of government spending everywhere else but the NIH. So what I wanted to do was hold a mirror up to them and force them to reconcile with that. So, we ran it as a referendum on these questions like, if you don't support socialized medicine, why would you support socialized medical research? If I could carve out just X% of those Republicans and force them to reconcile with their contradictions, I could drive a truck through the lab lobby's base. And that's what we did, right? We drove a truck through Republican public opinion support for this issue. It was a house of cards. All we had to do was just find that fault line between people who question government overreach, government spending, government competence everywhere except the NIH. What kind of sense does that make? Why do the NIH is not necessarily an effective steward of the money. And if you support animal testing in this country, all these questions about, do we need it for this or do you need it for that? Those are questions in a vacuum. When the rubber hits the road, you talk about competence of people like Anthony Fauci or Francis Collins or Jay Bhattacharya, not necessarily the most effective stewards of the money when you get into actuals, not hypotheticals, but actuals, because that's what biomedical animal testing, taxpayer funding animal testing in this country really is. So all we had to do was, again, reframe the question and run it accordingly and bring a lot of new people into the fight and finally make some impact on this one.
You mentioned Jay, so let's get into the recent controversies, or not recent. There've been not even controversies. The what would we call this? The friction between white coat waste and the current administration as it relates to this issue. So there's
Well,
a lot.
part of the administration. Only
Okay,
part of
well,
it.
sorry, part of this. You guys are doing so much; it's hard to keep track. But let's just focus, I guess, on the NIH, because
Yeah.
that's obviously something that I followed closely. I also was working there, so I know both Jay and I know Nicole from when I was there. And so to introduce, maybe can you introduce who Nicole? Let me make sure I don't Kleinstrauer is.
Her title, she's the deputy director, and she's functionally the animal testing czar. That's the title she people know her by. But I just want to take a step back. You said the administration. I mean, there's been a lot of writing about how the Trump administration is the greatest on animals in labs in history. And I don't think that that's wrong, but I think it's a little more nuanced on that. And this is important because this relates directly to Jay and Nicole. Here's the real deal on where the Trump administration is at. You've got NIH on one side, and you've got everyone else on the other side. The EPA, the USDA, the Navy, the Department of War. Those are the good guys. The black sheep is the NIH. They are fundamentally the worst actor in the Trump administration. Their policies are garbage. And Nicole Kleinstreuer is Exhibit A. Now, a lot of people haven't heard of her. She's the deputy director. I believe she's George Tidmarsh's niece, which was exposed actually by Laura Loomer a few months ago. A lot of people do know who Tidmarsh is from the FDA, or formerly at the FDA. Well, Kleinstreuer, she's a deputy director, and she's basically in charge of the animal testing portfolio. So let's rewind back to early last year. In January of 2025, White Coat Waste puts out our 4-point plan for the first 100 days of the Trump administration. We're the first ones to unveil this. And number one on this list, the top priority is defunding dog and cat labs. Not really a surprise given our history on this issue, right? Fauci's, Beagles, all that stuff. End dog and cat testing. Justin Goodman is the senior vice president of White Coat Waste, and senior vice president of advocacy and public policy. And he has a meeting with Jay Bhattacharya. I believe it was April of 2025.
Hold on, Anthony, disclosure here, like that meeting was coordinated by me, right? I mean, that was a meeting that I arranged. So I was present at the meeting. This is back when, Justin.
April, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. April of 2025. Okay. So it's early in Jay's.
Right after he became, right.
This is April of 2025. And Goodman I was not at the meeting, but I heard all about it. I know everything that happened in it. April of 2025, Goodman meets with Bhattacharya. And Bhattacharya promises to Justin Goodman's face, he promises him outright, explicitly and unambiguously promises, I'm going to end all dog, cat, and non-human primate testing. Again, primates wasn't even on wasn't number one on our priority list. We had to pick and choose. Can't do everything, right? Got to be reasonable and pragmatic about, I'd like to see it. I would oppose all of it, but we have to be pragmatic, and we did. We had a pragmatic 4-point plan, and number one was cat. Obviously, cats come first, and then dog. Cat and dog experimentation was number one. Justin relays that to Jay. Jay promises him outright, explicitly, unambiguously. You were there. It was a crystal clear promise. There was no equivocation. And there was no room for confusion. None. Zero. I'm going to end it. Great. Wonderful. Euphoria. Now, look, to be clear, White Coat Waste had euphoria about Bhattacharya before that moment. Before. Why? He was a friend of the organization. He called us, quote, unquote, absolute heroes. That's what he said. He said that we're absolute heroes. He said, now I'm paraphrasing, we were doing the work that investigative journalists are supposed to be doing, right? presumably to our investigations that first outed that US taxpayers funded the Wuhan lab. We were the first to do that. People know about Fauci's beagles only because of our organization and so much more. So that was great. Jay was speaking our language. I had been on podcasts. You remember back in 2024, I was on that podcast with you and Bhattacharya about CSU and the Bat Lab, the EcoHealth plan to import the bats to what we call Wuhan West out in CSU. Jay was saying all the right things. He said he opposed it. Uh, we were euphoric about Bhattacharya. And when he promised he promised us in that meeting, again, he's now sworn in that he's going to end it. What more can we ask for, right? That's number one on our priority list. Well, shortly
Well,
thereafter, yeah, please.
yeah. Maybe just to clarify or whatever, just to
Mhm.
maybe give a little bit of a context as well here. It was a private meeting, and I've
Mhm.
talked to you about thinking that I don't think he knew exactly what he was saying at the moment. Not that this excuses him to tell you something that wasn't true, but I think the problem here is even in that moment, I did say to Justin, proceed with caution on what you just heard, because it seemed a bit too good to be true. I think you even
And it
told him that
was.
was the problem. But
Yeah.
that's where like and I talked to Justin about this too. Like that's where whatever was said there, you are representing it accurately
Mhm.
in that
Mhm.
private meeting. It's a private meeting.
Yeah.
He said something that then later he couldn't deliver on. I don't know what what the right thing to do would be. But, no, I think I do know what the right thing to do would be. If it were me, I would have just called up Justin and said, "Look, what I said, that was not accurate. It's going to be different and whatever.
Yeah.
Apologies, whatever." That could have happened. It
I,
didn't,
I agree with you. It
but
would have gone
I
a long
don't
way.
think in that moment, it's hard for me to say I don't think that the intent was to I don't know what the intent was, so maybe I shouldn't even speak on that. But I think it would have been appropriate for there to be a rewind of that to say that was not correct. I did not accurately represent what's about to happen. But then go ahead and explain
Yeah.
what and later
Well,
happened that week.
I agree with you that that could have helped, but it got much, much worse than that. It's
Also,
because,
because it was a private meeting too, and then what I believe you're going to talk about, which I think is critically important, is public statements
yes.
been made that don't align with what's actually going on. So there's one thing, not, saying stuff in private that
Mhm.
is one deal, but then like publicly making statements that are not
Yeah.
supported by ongoing thing. There's sort of, for what it's
Let
worth.
me
Like,
let me 100%. I agree. Well said, Bryce. Well said. And let me just add one more thing in there. This is the meeting where a couple other things happened, right? Jay Bhattacharya had no idea about the clinical center, the septic shock dog lab inside the NIH. That was a white coat waste investigation from 2016, one of the very first dog lab investigations we did, which Jay did a big victory lap of getting rid of. Now, there were no beagles in that lab when Bhattacharya was in power, right? There were no more beagles left inside the NIH, which was, the so-called last remaining dog lab inside the NIH. That was our investigation. All of it was our investigation. And that was the meeting in April when Justin told him about it and said, we don't. So he educated him about that for the first time. And then the third thing that's important that happened in that meeting was this is the important. I think to me, I think this is as important as the broken promise, maybe more important because this is what relates now to Kleinsteuer. Justin told him, Jay, whatever you do with the dog and cat experiments, whatever you do not predicate it on alternatives or NAMs that they call it. That's the euphemism, new approach methodology, whatever. Organs on a chip, AI, whatever. Sounds great. We could talk about that. But the point is this. Justin said to him, Jay, whatever you do not predicate closing down dog and cat labs on grandfathering in new technology. Don't do it. It's fool's gold. So we educated him about that as well. So what happens? probably a week, 2 weeks after that infamous meeting in April, which you were at.
It was a few days. It was a few days because it was a policy that was about to be announced.
It was about a week. It was something like that. It was not far off of it. A week, give or take. It was, I mean, I'm guessing it was probably the end of I think it was like the end of April, maybe, give or take. I have to look back. But yes, it was very soon after. The first big announcement that they come out with was this whole Riva, whatever they call it, the Office of Research Innovation. And another one of these horrible Kleinsteuer lots of bureaucracy titles. And the whole thing is about, organs on the chip, new approach methodologies, dams, AI, just all this, not a single spending cut, not a single lab closed, not a single prohibition on funding, nothing on dogs and cats at all in there. Again, no phase out, no deadlines, no spending cuts at all, just more bureaucracy. Spend more money is what they were doing with this thing. We were hoping it would be what Jay promised he would do, right? Because that's what he said was coming. Didn't happen. What we got was a lot more bureaucracy with no cuts at all in there. None. We take one look at this the moment it came over the wire, and we're like, what the hell is this piece of crap? So we oppose it. We oppose it, and we say, more bureaucracy doesn't help beagles. We should be shutting down bureaucracies that hurt beagles. That's the way you make an impact for animals. You cut programs that harm them. You don't fund new ones to help them. That's what legacy animal rights groups want to do and tried to do for many years, and it got nowhere. The white coat waste approach is you cut funding and you cut programs that hurt them. That's the quickest, fastest, and most effective way to get them out and to stop the abuse, right? So this program, Nicole's brainchild here, Arriva, was useless for those purposes. And we oppose it. And things start getting hostile with Jay and Nicole. They freak out. Why are they opposing this? We get a call from one of Kleinsteuer's deputies and saying, what the hell, guys? Why are you opposing this? And we said, we're opposing this because we have integrity. Our job is to stick to our mission no matter what, which is advocate for animals in taxpayer-funded labs. This doesn't help them. We oppose. They just wanted us clapping like PETA, clapping like trained seals for nothing. This program did nothing to help animals, except just try to create PR for Jay and Nicole. So, we opposed it. That was the genesis of when everything started going south. Because again, we warned Jay, don't do this. This isn't the way to end beagle testing. This isn't the way to end cat and other animals. Any one of them, rats, mice, whatever you want to end. This is not the way to do it. It's not how you do it. So, meanwhile, that program, I would have rated it a D, as in, as in dog, a D. If I were a college professor, Bryce, I'd give it a D. So, because it didn't help. But then it became an F, because shortly thereafter, the checks start rolling. Jay goes on a spending spree and starts funding brand new dog and cat labs, right?
Okay, so what did you do on June 9th, if you can explain?
So, on June 9th, we escalated a complaint to the Inspector General of the HHS. Let me unpack what that means for a minute. A few minutes ago, you said, well, if Jay had called and apologized and said I misspoke or I spoke too quickly or I was doing people-pleasing behavior and just, said anything at the moment and I really can't do that and I don't mean to mislead, whatever. That's one thing. But then they start doubling down in public statements about materially false statements about what they were actually doing. In other words, Nicole, we tracked, close to about $150 million in spending on new and renewed grants for experimentation on cats and dogs. 150 million since they took power, right? Some of these were brand spanking new, year one grants. we had the goods. We track all of this stuff in real time, right? That's what we do. We follow the money on animal testing, right? You can't shit a shitter, as they say. We knew exactly what Bhattacharya and Nicole were funding over there. Shortly, so in last July, there was on one of Jay's podcasts, Nicole was the guest. And on that podcast, Nicole started telling some whoppers. And one of those whoppers was that all this dog and cat experimentation, quote unquote, predates us. It predates us. Not we didn't cause this. It predates us. False. 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 Not true. We know when the checks were written. We know which ones are new, and we know who funded it. And unfortunately, that was a lie. So we caught her in that lie. She said this on a materially misleading and false statements on the director's podcast. So we filed a complaint about information quality and from the NIH back in January. We sent it to them, asking them to follow the Information Quality Act and fix the fault, correct the false statements that Nicole made, that they weren't the ones funding this, that it predated them. And Nicole missed the deadline. And then again, they missed the second deadline. Again, they were mandated, I think it was like 60 days or something like that, for 2 months to respond. That's the guidelines for the NIH to respond to the false statements. Again, punted it, but this time it turns out it was they were asking the matter to be adjudicated by Nicole's own department, that DeKipsey department. So Fox watching the henhouse on Nicole's own spending spree. So we just filed it with the Inspector General.
When you file this complaint, does it just go into the the abyss and never get looked at?
Well, hopefully not. Hopefully not. I mean, it's Nicole's department. They put Nicole's department in charge of policing her on this. What kind of sense does that make? So we had to escalate it to the IG, and we'll pursue it. We'll keep shining a light on it, and hopefully get some action on that. But even if it doesn't, it's a step in the right direction. But we never put all our eggs in one basket, Bryce. What the next step is, we work with Congress for oversight in appropriations. We just passed defund, got the language in, we got the language in the House side over there. So we're going to keep to defund dog and cat testing. We work with Congress. We are going to keep shining a light with the investigations. We keep incrementally putting pressure on them to do the right thing, which we define as prohibiting the spending on dog and cat labs.
For you, do the right thing is just, you are mission focused. Like, your mission is
That's
clear.
The definition of do the right thing for us is, are you abiding by what is our mission, and expose and end experiments?
The NIH is spending money to do animal research, and you are saying we oppose that. There's perhaps a good faith way to engage in a dialogue about this, but in addition, what you've pointed out is the officials, instead of just acknowledging what's happening, are making, in your opinions, they are making like just material false statements about the ongoing research and about whether their hands are tied. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Materially false and materially misleading statements.
The second thing that they're doing, and I want to really just draw a clear attention to this one, which is they're using what I would refer to as sort of debate ending tactics. You're accused essentially of like causing violent threats, right? Or death threats even, to be happening to NIH officials. Is that a fair characterization of what you're being accused of?
Yes, and it's false. It's completely false. I mean, they sound like Fauci.
Has there been evidence provided that those are happening? Have you seen actual evidence that NIH officials are receiving death threats, harassment? Have you seen that?
No.
Okay.
I haven't seen any evidence.
Okay, so you haven't seen evidence that actual threats are happening, number one. Number two, does your organization condone threats and harassment towards NIH officials, towards anybody?
God, no. I mean, we always, whether we're rallying folks against Fauci's policies or Bhattacharya's policies. 100%. We've been doing this for a long time, and it's peaceful. It's got to be peaceful, law-abiding, polite. We always look at, if you look at the scripts we've used for rallying our members to make phone calls or sign email petitions or whatever they're doing, it's always politely, peacefully. It's 100% of the time is that's always what we tell people to do. Always, it's the only way. It's the only way, and it's the only way we've ever engaged with that. We abhor any violence, and we've categorically opposed it forever. It's forever. I mean, again, this is the debate-ending tactics. Is what Fauci did the same thing during Beaglegate. They did the same thing to us.
The other criticism that I want to have you address is you guys have been criticized for associating with Laura Loomer. How did that relationship develop?
I want to shut labs down. I don't, my goal is to win my philosophy is win the campaign. Win the campaign, right? Win it quickly and effectively and efficiently. So, but, talk about like controversial figures and all of that. And I'm reminded of a quote from Frederick Douglass. I will unite with anybody to do right and nobody to do wrong. I would unite with anyone to do the right thing and nobody to do the wrong thing. If that philosophy is good enough for someone like Frederick Douglass, you're damn well right. It's good enough for someone like me. Okay. I will unite with anybody. This organization will work with anybody, anyone, to do the right thing, but specifically working on our mission. We work with, you're darn right, we'll work with Laura Loomer, we'll work with anybody. We'll work with anybody, controversial or not. Far right, far left, center. We'll work with anyone but the key is it comes down to our philosophy of how we engage. We stick to the mission. We don't work with Laura Loomer on any of her other activities or issues, right? If she's weighing in on the war, if she's weighing in on immigration, if she's weighing in on education policy, whatever she's talking about, we have nothing to do with that. That's not what we do. As long as it's on mission for us, which is defined as expose and end taxpayer-funded animal testing, you're darn well right. We're going to work with Ms. Loomer, and anything we can do to get the word out, use that big megaphone she has, use that direct line she's got right to the White House. Of course, we're going to do it. It's been brutally effective, right? The New York Times did a great profile, Stolberg's piece, and she got into this a little bit about how effective it's been. Last year, we got the United States Navy to outright ban funding for cat and dog experiments, right? That's the first ban in American history from a department ever, right? Well, how'd that happen? Well, couple years before that, we launched a Freedom of Information Act request for a DoD-funded lab in Pittsburgh, where they were electroshocking cats, shoving marbles up their butts, and doing this and electroshocking them in incontinence and impotence experiments. Okay, horrible, horrible stuff. Cats near and dear to my heart. So anything and everything on cats will do with taxpayer-funded abuse, right? So we got into that. We won this FOIA challenge, and we exposed the marble in butt, marble in rectum, and electroshocking experiments. But we worked with everybody to get the word out on that, not just Loomer, right? We worked with Rand Paul. We worked with Ben Cohen, right? That MAGA extremist, Ben Cohen of Ben and Jerry's, right? He's not, far left, to the much further to the left. But we unite strange bedfellows to save animals. That's how we win, right? It's a very different playbook than most animal rights groups will do. Most animal rights groups will ally with other animal rights groups, the usual suspects, not the school of thought I come from, which was reverse that model and bring together strange bedfellows, right? Far left and far right. But we worked with Laura Loomer to get the word out on that. She passed that experiment to Pete Hegseth, right? The head of the DOD, now it's called the Department of War. Hegseth took one look at it and told her, he goes, "What the fuck is this?" Pardon my French. I don't know if he used a curse. I wasn't in the room, but he said something like that. He said, "What the hell is this? I didn't know about this. Let me get back to you. I'm going to look into this right away." And he did. He cut it. He cut the grant to the marble and electroshock experiments on cats. 10 days later, the Navy, which was the branch funding that specific cat experiment, which I passed to Loomer and she got it up. Well, Elon Musk weighed in too, but she passed it to both of them. Hegseth cuts the lab, whacks it. Then, 10 days later, the United States Navy took one look at this, was horrified by it, and said, "This is conduct unbecoming of the United States Navy. We want nothing to do with this electroshocking cats. So we're going to do one better here. We're going to outright prohibit and ban funding for dog and cat testing," right? I'm not sure we would have been able to pull that off without Loomer's connection to Hegseth. So you're darn well right I brought her in for this, and we did it on mission. We united to save the cats. I'll defend that. And I'll keep doing it. And like I said, if it's good enough for an advocate like Frederick Douglass, you're darn well right. You better believe it's good enough for someone like me.
It's certainly mission aligned, but then the question is, are you paying her to advocate on your behalf?
We do, but we compensate a lot of folks on this stuff. I mean, that's what we do. We spend money to get the word out and bring in people to do this stuff. That's our job, is to raise money and spend it to get the word out. And that's what we do. That's our mission. That's what we raise money as a nonprofit to do, is to bring in influencers and advocates to expose and close. That's why we're effective, to get the word out, to use that big megaphone to expose it and end it.
So in that
That's what we're
mindset,
supposed to do.
it doesn't matter. Like, is the idea that it
Get
doesn't
the word
really
out.
matter. Well, it doesn't matter what Loomer really believes, right? Is that the point? Or
I don't care what it's not about intent, right? When I founded this, I think that's an important point, Bryce. Let's hone in on that for a minute. Does it really matter what someone believes? What is the real intent of why Republicans were going after Fauci on dog testing? What is their real motive? I don't give two beans what somebody's intent is. Look, here's Delilah, right? Can you see that? There she is. She's sleeping right now. She don't give a shit what someone's intent or motive is. Okay? I'm speaking on her behalf, but I'm pretty sure. There she is, sunning herself in the mirror. You don't give a shit about intent. She cares about outcomes. She's out of a lab right now, right? Her brother was killed there. 22 of her kittens were slaughtered and incinerated in that lab. She don't give a shit about intent. What she cares is impact. Impact is more important than intent. That's what animals care about, and that's called being a good nonprofit, is staying true to the mission. Are we helping animals with our tactics? Yeah.
for you guys, like your intent is clear, but I do think there is many people sort of use you when they need, like they use your organization when it's good PR for them and then get surprised.
Bhattacharya did it too. I mean, Bhattacharya did a victory lap based on our organization in early May of 2025, right? He did a victory lap about Jay Bhattacharya closes a Beagle lab. Well, that was the Beagle lab that we exposed and passed to him inside the clinical center. They're going to do that. I don't care if they use us when they do the right thing, right? As long as they're using us on the mission. You can't be off mission. It can't be. They're going to listen, Bryce. People are going to ally with us and get involved with us for their own purposes. I don't have a litmus test on why they get involved with us. The incentive and the motive is irrelevant. What is relevant is the outcome. The moment we start bringing people in here to do work that's outside of the mission, I'll resign. I'll leave and I'll go do something else. All right. We're not doing that. As long as we're bringing people in, sticking on mission, it's fair game. That's what you want in a good watchdog. That's what you want in a truthful steward of a nonprofit and nonprofit funds and being an effective issue advocate. That's what cats and labs want. That's what dogs and labs want. So that's what animals want, is impact. And as long as we're sticking on mission to do that, who can argue with that?
You worked with Laura Trump, right? As well, your organization worked with Laura Trump.
Yes, and that started somewhat in the first administration with Laura Trump. The first time we worked with the first daughter-in-law, excuse me, first daughter-in-law, Trump. The first time we did was actually with the Veterans Administration. Before Fauci was the VA, and the VA was one of the most important and significant campaigns we've ever done for dogs and labs. That was the first agency to be wiped out of abusing dogs. And we worked with her in the first administration. So yes, we did engage with her on that one.
Did her people recently reach out to you to say back off of HHS or NIH?
People affiliated with her. Look, to back off of NIH and HHS, unfortunately, a lot of people have asked us to. Yeah, it's Jim Greenbaum you mentioned. He was a former major donor to white coat waste. He was a major donor to us, and a lot of folks have reached out to us to pressure us to don't criticize NIH. Nobody wants to be criticized, and we have unfortunately been pushed on and by a lot of folks, a lot of influential folks, to not criticize the administration. And that's we have to be truthful here. We have to be. People may not like us. Fine, but you have to respect that we're sticking to the mission. Our mission is to call out, to expose and end whoever's doing this stuff, right? We're gonna get pushback, and we have been getting pushback for holding Kleinsteuer accountable, holding Jay accountable, and we're dealing with this constantly.
Hopefully people watching this understand that, like, you can't be bought. Like, your mission, or like persuaded with gifts or whatever, or convinced to do something that is not in the interest of your organization. And that's okay. It's okay to disagree on this. But what's not okay is to, like, falsely accuse you guy of like causing death threats and that kind of stuff.
During the last administration, probably the biggest campaign we ever did, the biggest investigation we ever did, was outing Fauci on Beaglegate, right? The world knows about Fauci's beagles. They know about the Wuhan lab funding also because of us. Have we earned our bipartisan credibility yet? That we're going to call everyone out on both sides? Have we not? Can we put that to bed, that we were doing this only when Democrats were in charge? Obviously, that was not quite right. It's saying that we were only going after Fauci because he's Biden's guy or he's a Democrat. No, can we please just end that rap? Because that was the rap on us before, was that, well, these guys are just the Republican group doing this. No, we were courting Republicans to make them good. They used to be bad on animal testing. We wanted to make them good. Isn't that a good thing? Get both sides involved. But this rap on, have we not earned at least our credibility that we're going to go after whomever, whoever's doing this in both administrations? And clearly we kept our word, right? Because during Beaglegate, that was the rap, was you guys are just doing this because it's a Republican thing. No, we're doing it now. Under Trump administration, we're calling out, working with Loomer, working with others. If there's other people out there who want to get involved with this, call me. It's because I'll get you involved. I'll bring you on. If you got the goods, if you can deliver, let's expose more. So what can I say? We've earned, you might not like us, but you will respect us.
As I just have settled on, disagree with you guys on some stuff, but I still respect you, and we can get along and maybe have the dialogues that are not like, but you bring a very, very important perspective to scientific research about the ethics of experimentation on animals and the obligations of researchers. So you guys are rare in how mission focused you are. And if the mission isn't complicated, and I think people are trying to overcomplicate it to say, well, wait a second, all animal research? Wait, we need some of it. Right. That's right. Just say you need some of it. Make that case rather than accuse these guys of being, stochastic terrorists.
Fanatical zealotry for our single issue, laser-like focus on that mission. And yeah, we will bring on anybody we can, whether it's Loomer on the right or her equivalent on the left or whoever else, we will do it. We know it's unsettling. I'm not going to pretend, that's part of the point. It's because, we want to make this unsettling too, in the sense of getting people to turn their heads and say, holy shit, I never thought of it like that. Because that's what they're doing. People weren't, dog testing was raging inside of the federal government for a long time. And we unsettled people, by showing them something. We tell inconvenient truths here. It was an inconvenient truth that American taxpayers funded the Wuhan lab. Nobody wanted to hear that. We got called in early May of April 2020 and May of 2020 we were called nonsense and COVID disinformation and misinformation. When Fauci, a year later, when Beaglegate, we did the same thing on dogs. We were same playbook. We were called disinformation peddlers and liars and horrible things that NIAID must, deal with now. We're going to tell inconvenient truths. It's people don't want to hear the information that but nobody's falsifying what we're saying either, right? If Jay and Nicole want to end the debate, the best way to do it is prove us wrong. Meet argument with argument. Meet fact with counterfact. Prove us wrong. Prove that you're legally mandated to write all these grants. Prove that these grants predate you. Show us, timestamp it. Go to NIH Reporter and prove that it predates you, because we've done exactly the opposite. Meet argument with argument.
Are there any last things you'd like to say? I know we didn't cover Jeff Taubenberger and Vincent Munster. Do you want to say anything about that?
Well, look, it's obviously there's a shakeup going on at NIAID. NIAID is an issue that is mission critical to this organization, right? We have a lot of vital business in front of NIAID. That is our mission, from the Wuhan lab to Fauci's beagles. That's NIAID. And, we're whoever the next director is going to be over there, permanent, we're going to hold them accountable. And they better take note of, former friends will also be held accountable. J. Bhattacharya was a former friend, and we got to do our mission. That's our mission. It is regardless of who's in power, we're going to hold them accountable. Don't fund dog and cat testing at NIAID.
Or if you do, expect White Coat Waste to draw attention to it. So that maybe is the bottom line.
That's
right?
a guarantee. That's a guarantee. Us and others, who we're going to bring on to get the word out on that. It is inevitable. We will not stop doing that.
All right. Well, Anthony, thanks again for joining me, and I look forward not only to doing another podcast, but I think we have some plans to do something socially again, maybe next weekend. I look forward to it. Oh, you got to wait a second. Where's the guest we had? You got to get her up here again too. All right, this Delilah.
She's kind of.
All right, until we have, Anthony and Delilah, thank you for joining me today on the Science From the Fringe podcast. Until next time, my name is Bryce Nickels. Take care, everybody.